Looks like we have Dave Alexander on Zoom. Welcome you, Dave. Oh, I'm not reading it, sorry.
I don't hear you now.
Can you hear me now, Dave?
Oh, there we go. I was on mute. Yeah, I do, Steve. Looks like a fine group. Good to see you.
In here. So at this meeting, I think it's one of the first times that I've been told anyway that the commission and the council have met together, and I actually love it. I think it'll be a good blend if we have to do this once in a while. So what I'd like to do is make sure everybody feels like they're welcome, and those that are joining us by Zoom or YouTube or whatever it's called, welcome. But I'm going to get right into it. And we're going to talk about a mixed residential overlay zone and accessory dwelling units. And I'm just going to turn this over to our city planner, Jake, and he's going to take us on a ride.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, City Council, Planning Commission staff. It's great to be with you. I'm going to jump right in. We have about 1 hour. I'm going to present first on ideas and concepts for the mixed residential zone. And then maybe we discuss that for a little bit. And then I'd like to leave at least 20 minutes for accessory dwelling units. So if you could hold comments and questions till we get through the first presentation. And I would say the objective of tonight is to have a direction from the city council with input from the planning commission as to would the city like to pursue the creation of two new ordinances, and you don't have to do both. It could be one or the other. And then also maybe some comments on that. But please don't get into the weeds of the details of building heights and setbacks and all those, nuances of zoning. Do you like the idea of it? This will start you thinking about it. If the city council gives that direction, then the process would be create an ordinance, work through with the planning commission, hold a public hearing. The planning commission recommends it, and then it comes to the city council also for consideration and adoption. So certainly we're not putting anything new in place tonight.
So Jake, I want to interrupt you. I just learned this just a few days ago that we'll have a hard close at 6:55.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, and the idea of this new ordinance came about as part of the general plan. We're in the process of revising the draft, getting where we want it to be and adopt it. And we've been talking about housing. And also it came from a tour that I went with the mayor on and Ty, the city manager, and Teresa. And we looked at a bunch of housing in the Wasatch Front, some good development. And then also a developer is looking at doing kind of a townhome development. And that could be a candidate for this, may not be. However, things in place kind of said, hey, maybe we need something new in our zoning toolbox. And really think about zoning as a toolbox. That's what it is. It's our DNA of the city. So I just want to throw out some good city planning kind of ways to look at city planning, at least how I do. It's all about getting the right development in the right place. There's good developments, but they can go in the wrong place. And then also there's bad developments that can go in the right place or anywhere. And cities have all kinds, but that's what we want to focus on, the right development in the right place, adapting to new circumstances and the needs of residents. Today is different than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago. Willing to try something new, learn and progress. Cities are laboratories. That's how we all learn. Collaboration between cities and stakeholders. That's what we've been doing, talking with developers, talking to the public. This will go through a public process and then willing to try a pilot project. Some of maybe the purposes of this new zone would be infill development, focusing on the city core, growing within, quality of life, change the paradigm and the perspective on the new development, provide housing choices, types, sizes, and costs so that we can stretch out that spectrum of housing and not just have single family only or apartments only, that we can look at this, stretching this out. Compact development can also be quality. Compact or attached doesn't necessarily mean poor quality as well. And it's good to make progress on general plan ideas even before it's adopted. I've done this with other cities and counties that once you have something good and you need to start it, and you start it. You don't have to wait till the general plan's in place. Just want to talk a little bit about this planning concept of a transect. And the idea is where you take a city and you have your urban core, and this is maybe a commercial street or State Street. We're not talking Salt Lake. This is all scaled down to Morgan City scale. And then you go out a neighborhood and out a neighborhood, and then somewhere out here is the county. And this idea of you have your urban core, and then as you move out, you have a couple different layers. This is good planning. This is good design, that you have this transect or this continuum of going out into the county and the country. And Morgan City is a great place to practice that. And I think it would work really well here. So I just want to kind of share that perspective on it. This is a great book resource if you like to read Pocket Neighborhoods, this idea of creating great little neighborhoods and pockets. Some of the ideas that I learned years ago are from this book. And the picture on the right is actually a development that I visited in Seattle, and I visited first, and then this book came out second. And I was like, hey, I recognize that. And so it's a great little kind of award-winning neighborhood in Seattle area in the suburbs. So here's some ideas. And again, everything is just conceptual tonight. So you can throw tomatoes if you want, but just wait till the end. But this idea of a mixed residential. Now, I'm not using the word mixed use because we're not necessarily combining mixed residential and commercial uses. We could do that if you wanted, but what we're proposing is mixing residential types within a neighborhood. And it's not always done, right? We always want to, okay, you live in a house and you got 12,000 square foot lot and a third acre and a half acre and 1 acre, or a smaller lot, or you live in a townhome. We like to spread everything out, birds of a feather, but there's also a lot of reasons why we can't mix things up a little bit. Provides for variety of architecture, variety of neighborhoods, a lot of different reasons to mix things up a little bit. Thank you. So, one of the ideas on this is it would be an overlay zone. So it's not pre-assigned. It's not saying it goes here or here or here. That if a developer or landowner had a property that they thought was appropriate for this zone, they would come in and apply for that overlay zone. And so it's sitting in the toolbox, but it's not pre-assigned. It would require legislative action to get that rezone. So a project would go before the council, a public hearing to get that with a recommendation from the Planning Commission. And then in terms of land uses, residential, maybe home office, but not commercial. And then this last idea requires site plan approval in conjunction with rezoning. So we're seeing what we're going to get before at the same time. We're seeing a site plan that meets the ordinance, and then that time is also when it gets adopted. And we'll do questions at the end, and we can go back. Now, I want to talk a little bit about project size, kind of this Goldilocks principle, going back to elementary school. Not too big, not too small. I don't know that I have the magic size for that, but I'm starting out with 3 to 6 acres. It's infill development. And the reason for 3-ish is so that we can there may need to be an HOA. We're going to require some amenities, maybe a little pocket park, an HOA park. And also we don't necessarily want it to be a large development. We've had discussions at Planning Commission about master plan community. That's a separate idea, put that aside. And so this idea of it's kind of infill, maybe just this right size of a nice little neighborhood. Units per acre. I know that's where a lot of people like to go with discussion. I'm saying maybe 10 to 11 units per acre. That could go up or down a little bit. This next idea that at least 25% of the units are single family homes. That's one of the residential. And there's this idea of 25% of single family homes actually equals about 40% to 50% of the land being single family. So if you're zooming in on Google Earth and you saw this type of development from up above, the land use would be as much single family as it would be attached housing. And then other units could be twin homes or duplexes. A twin home is when you have two parcels next to each other, separate ownership. A duplex is typically one lot with two units, typically one ownership. And then also townhomes. And I didn't put in here stacked housing, apartments or condos, but it could be something explored if you wanted to as well. And then this last one, maximum number of units per building, somewhere in the 3 to 5. And this is a little bit in the details of the zoning, but I want to kind of frame this. And the reason why there's a maximum is so that everything remains at residential scale. And that's kind of one of the important ideas behind this concept is residential scale. So it doesn't look like complexes, or by complexes, I mean apartment complexes that look single family in scale. So I want to throw out some of the characteristics that I think would be really good for this type of development. The first one is residential scale and feel. And so there's a maximum building height in terms of height and width, and also some characteristics in the zoning about that the building looks like a single family. And this unit right here, does anybody have a guess? Is that one home or is that multiple units?
3.
It's 3. Lance, good job. You get a prize from Teresa. So this is a single family, excuse me, this is probably 3 townhomes together, but it looks like a single family home. And that's the idea, that the neighborhood would look all single family, even though it may not necessarily be built that way. And it provides housing options. So the homes are single family scale in terms of height and architecture. And you'll notice one of the ways you could tell is you see like there's an address here, and then there's an address here. And then I think there's one right over here too that comes in from the other way. Another characteristic is all the units would face a street or onto a common green or park space. Nobody wants to be looking at the back of somebody else's house or looking at a garage or looking at whatever it is. But if you're looking onto a park, think about these units right here. These are single family homes. How great would that be to be looking out onto this little oval park, and your kids are going to be out there playing, or grandkids out there playing at night when they come to visit, or you're looking out on the street. And then all the green space connects directly to the street. So you have this common, strong connection to the street. But these are things that you can require by ordinance, that can be in the code, that every home has this connection to the street and also to a green area. This example is from Kaysville, and you'll notice these homes face onto the common green as well. So kind of a perspective there. A next characteristic, all developments have a common green or a pocket park kind of amenity that goes with them. And this is where that minimum number comes in. If you're going to have a little neighborhood park, a pocket park, there's money to build that. And it's going to come from the developer's going to include that into the cost of the development. And that's where you need a minimum number of units. Maybe it's 30 units, maybe it's 40, but somewhere in there. So a portion of that sale goes towards that. And then the other reason is the idea is that a little pocket park is more, it's HOA. It's not cost effective for cities to maintain these. What I've learned from other cities around the state is they typically like to maintain parks that are 2 acres and bigger. And this type of park and open space is maybe a quarter acre or a half acre or something like that. No off-street parking. There may be a few stalls on the street, but pretty much everybody's walking in and it's a neighborhood function. You're not playing soccer games there, and it's not busy on Saturday like the city parks. Those are for other reasons. Some ideas on architecture, it could be different styles, colors, but a great way to really increase the quality of life is having a porch. Porch goes a long way. I've spent time in developments and neighborhoods like this And I've seen in my own neighborhood that people that have porches, I spend time on them. I've talked to strangers asking, you know, you guys have a lot of porches around here. Do you spend more time outside? And they're like, we do. And that's a great way to increase that community development, that community feel. And part of the idea behind this, the zone is creating community. You know, this is for people that want to know their neighbors, that want to have little block parties. And so having a porch would be a really good feature as part of that. Some of the other characteristics could be street trees, water-wise landscaping, landscaping quality, really requiring a number of trees and shrubs per acre, that type of thing. So someone does have to do landscaping, architectural variety so that no unit is the same. I use an example, I may have mentioned the Planning Commission, I apologize, but a couple months ago, we were visiting a family member at a townhome development in Lehigh, and we pull on the street. My wife's been there 5 times and I've been there 2. And we're on the street and we're like, okay, where does your sister live? And she doesn't know. We have to call her to say which unit is yours, because they all look exactly the same. And turns out we were 2 houses down and we didn't even know. And so that would be the idea behind that zoning there, is that every building looks different and maybe some of the units have variation as well. Garages, in terms of where does the garage go? Colors on garages, like a darker color, making them look receding. And then this last item, open space, landscape, and maintenance, really requiring that from the development. These are some of the main characteristics of what would distinguish this between a typical subdivision. Okay, so that's it on my presentation. We actually got through it really fast. Well, maybe not that fast, but I want to open this up for comments and ideas and suggestions. And let's start out being broad. What's the big idea here? Do you like this idea? It's a little bit different than what we require now through our zoning ordinances in Morgan City.
Have you looked over the city plot and said this would be a good place for this overlay?
I've
To
seen
identify places where this might work?
I've seen a few, and one of which is the developer who's proposing it. One thing I could do is actually do analysis of the city in terms of parcel sizes on an infill, and we could identify that and maybe tweak things accordingly to that. That's a great suggestion.
The other thought I had as I was looking at this, I love the concept of community and designing from the beginning for that. There's a lot of the variety, the garages, the green space. One thing I noticed absent from all the pictures that I recall is no fences. And that seems appropriate in a situation like this. Have you seen where this has been done, how fences are addressed?
I think fences can be okay. They'd have to be kind of backyard only. Oh, and it also may not work. I think that's something to explore. I didn't spend a lot of time on fences.
I was just curious. There's a twist on the mantra. Great fences make great strangers.
That's true.
Hey, Jake.
Yeah.
The ones I've taken developers to and that I've been around to, the garages are in the back and they do have a fenced yard back there. A fenced area, let's say. So it is private that way, but not in the front.
And the ones that are small, nobody's playing a full baseball game in the backyard.
Jake, I have a question. One of your bullet points, you said they're not pre-assigned. So moving forward with the master plan, is that saying that you would not have a mixed use zone? Is that what you were saying, where you said they're not pre-assigned, or?
What I'm saying is on the zoning map, we would not go ahead and necessarily say these areas are this mixed residential zone.
Okay, all right.
The developer would, it's an overlay, so they would come in and say,
This is what I'd like to do with. the
yeah,
product.
this is what I like to do. It's an optional. There could be requirements. I've thought about maybe this is only appropriate south of the freeway and not necessarily on the hillside. of the city. There may be certain parameters in terms of, because the focus is on more on infill. So we do look at the city and say where it's applicable.
Yeah, so I guess my question really was, so if you looked at our, you know, the general plan eventually, it would not designate specifically mixed residential zone. It would just, again, the developer would come in, the property owner would come in and apply for that. Is that
Correct.
Have you been to Daybreak?
Yeah, a lot of these photos are from Daybreak, but lots of other developments too that are, I look for smaller ones too, because Daybreak's a city I mean, it's part of South Jordan, but it's a city in of itself. However, you can do this in neighborhoods as well.
I have a son that lives there and, you know, part of it, I think what they did in order to make some of this work was that they made the streets extremely narrow. And a lot of the homes do not have garages until they park on the street. So a lot of these things you're proposing, it would eliminate a lot of those problems because literally if you're driving, there's not room for two cars to pass without one of them moving over. And so I think we have to be careful if we do something like this to make sure that we don't make it impractical just to get it all in that space and make the road so small. It really is a problem.
It's very tight and sometimes it slows things way down. And certainly this would not be appropriate on a main corridor like State Street or Young Street or other places.
And my son's home is on one side of the street, they're all homes. On the opposite side of the street, they're all condos and apartments, and they're all parked on the street because there's not enough parking.
Mm.
So.
Question on, how do we get this started? And are we trying to get developers to buy in? Are we just telling them, look, this is what we're doing? Is any project, it comes down to dollars and cents. And so, I mean, this is what everybody like to see. Get rid of the cookie cutter stuff up here and get started. What have you seen? How do we get this promoted that it makes sense that people that come to Morgan and get started developing, this is the expectation for those guys?
Well, the getting started would be getting it in as a new ordinance. So we have that zoning tool available. And then as developers come in, they can talk with myself or staff or anyone. And, you know, we'd be like, well, you look at this and there does need to be some incentive for this. And that's where the zoning density or that kind of thing, that would be an incentive. As far as we know, we at least have one that's interested in it. That's kind of partially why we're here today. Ty, did you have something?
I just wanted to mention, and I'm guilty of this, as soon as 40-something homes were gonna go in behind my house, I put up a 6-foot fence. Every single lot in that subdivision has a 6-foot fence around it, some of them even in the front yards. Dave Rich and I actually drove down to one of these developments in Kaysville, the Hill
Farm
Farms or something. Middle of the day, you know what I noticed? There were 2 people, different homes, sitting out on their front porches. The neighborhood behind my house, I get down through there fairly regularly with my job, and occasionally in the evening turn around or something. I have never seen someone sitting out on their front porch. So I think as we drove through there, Dave and I looked at that, it's a different culture than what we're used to, where not everybody has a boat and a house trailer and 14 vehicles. So it's a different culture, if that's the word, than what we're used to. I don't necessarily not like it, but I do like the idea. It's a different way of living. I do like the idea of these neighborhoods being completely open. And I think in my mind, I'm willing to give up some higher densities to have that open feel as you drive by versus every single lot. I mean, the things I do and my hobbies and what, I'm probably not going to run out and buy one, but I like the feel of the neighborhoods. And I think maybe giving up a little higher density to have that feel you're maybe catering to a little bit different type of people than what some of us are, but I think there's a demand for it.
Jake, in these, mixed residentials, these slides you've been showing us, I assume most of them are private, correct? Would that be correct? As far as, and what I'm getting at is maintenance, like of the park, pocket parks,
Yeah.
the snow removal and all that type of thing. Are they,
The street could still be public street, but if there's an alley, that would probably be private. And certainly the open space part would be private in terms of maintenance.
Jake, how do you ensure the residential aesthetic or the look?
Well, that's where some of the different requirements, there's architectural requirements in terms of homes have to look, different next to each other, requiring windows, like materials where the doors are facing. To me, there's a balance between having good standards for architecture, but then not dictating too much. We still want the architect to be the architect. However, there's a number of things that you can put in place that require that. And some of that's even just requiring variety, that no home next to another home can be the same. You have to change building colors, materials, styles, window treatment, just things like that.
Okay. Talk just a little bit about you mentioned the public hearing process on the overlay. That be typical of just any zone change? Yes,
yeah. Except for they would need to have a site plan and maybe like a presentation of what they're proposing. That way you see what you get.
I think that's probably paramount. I mean, that's key in that neighbors, particularly in our small footprint of Morgan City, neighbors are going to want to, because of the higher density, what do I get in exchange for it? That was referenced a little bit earlier, but I think that's about the only way, one of the ways to sell that higher density concept is the benefits that you're talking about.
And this is where I think that it would require some, for some people, it may be a tough pill to swallow, some of the public, meaning just some higher density in their neighborhood. However, the response by the planning commission, city council could be, this development type has really high standards. They have to bring in a park. They have to meet these architectural requirements. We've raised the bar and their standards are actually higher than your current zoning. And so don't be scared of riffraff kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
So, and of course it would be different, but it also brings in different opportunities.
I'm curious how this overlay works. If you're thinking only for infill that's currently available today, and there may be a limited amount of 3 to 6 acre sections in the city where this could happen, or is every residential zone potentially covered with this overlay? And gentrification projects, or where it may be a rebuild and still trying to take advantage of this density. Is that something that you're envisioning, or is this only in specific areas?
I would say that'd be part of this process. We would work on that. I think that's all a matter of input. I don't necessarily see someone going out and buying, what would it be, like 20 quarter acre lots and putting together a piece of property to do this. That's not going to happen. Certainly someone may have to put together 2 or 3 or 4 properties, but not a lot. I don't see gentrification being a big risk in Morgan City with this type. You see that in cities where somebody's getting 20 to 40 units an acre, is where you see that type of, buying up homes and tear down and rebuild.
I had one more question. So site plan, a type or time of rezone, so you could be fairly strict with that and tie it to a site plan saying this is, I can just think of one thing fairly recently where we were shown one thing and maybe it was something else when they actually go to apply and what they showed us didn't match up. You could be fairly strict with a side plan saying this is what we are approving for this rezone.
Correct. Yeah.
Make them even be fairly detailed with it so you know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, and I think what you would be requiring is the layout, the park amenity, the street connections, what type of lots. And the zoning requirement goes all the way through building. So this is a case where planning staff would have to review architectural plans or our Josh, our building inspector. Yes, so he would have to, the building, the person that approves the building plans would have to check the zoning as well. So he would be looking at architectural because it would follow through on that, because what I'm suggesting today is not just pretty pictures, is actually text kind of backing this up. Gary, if you don't mind jumping in, I mean, your experience on this type of zoning, it's a little bit atypical, a little bit more form and design standard based, but I thought maybe you'd had a comment.
Sure. One of the benefits of this type of zoning is that in House Bill 98, a couple of years ago, you remember they stripped away a lot of our power to regulate design. What this does, we did leave a couple of exceptions in that. One of the exceptions was specifically this type of development, which is a planned unit development is what it is. It's a special kind of planned unit development because it's mixed in its residential uses. But with this, the city can really do more than it can right now with just a cookie cutter square subdivision. You can approve a design for the way things are laid out, the walkability of the community, even the way that the actual homes look. You know, Jake was talking about porches. Do you know you can't require a porch today in just a regular subdivision? But under this format, you could require those porches, you know, that are so much an integral part of the community. And, you know, the interesting thing about this is catching on for that reason, because cities have more flexibility as to what they can do under this format. The other thing is it kind of combines uses. I don't know any of these mixed residential uses that have been less valuable, that once they're built, they're leased for less, or you've got low income or anything else. There's a good mix of individuals of different sizes of units. And so you're going to get different people that can afford, you know, different sizes of units, but they're all top rate. I mean, if you look at Destination Homes and what they built in Kaysville, and, you know, barring the streets, I agree, narrow streets are kind of a pain. But just the layout of the project provides for different people, you know, a mix in the community that just a regular subdivision doesn't provide for. You actually get to know your neighbors, like Lance said. You know, they're much more open, but this is really the direction that a lot of cities in the state of Utah are going as the legislature pushes harder for housing affordability. It's not because it's not affordable housing, it's housing affordability. So somebody wants a smaller place with, you know, 2 bedrooms, they can actually acquire that right next to a place with 3 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms. You know, you've got that mix of uses in the community. So to that extent, it's beneficial. And the overlay is a good thing because an overlay is like a cloud that kind of, when certain criteria are met in the underlying zone, a developer can pull that overlay down and use that overlay. And it's really their choice to pull that overlay down. So the developer would choose to pull it down. Why? Because of the densities, because of the flexibility, because these are saleable. These are very saleable. Whereas sometimes the larger homes on larger lots are getting less and less saleable, believe it or not. And so those are all the advantages, but that's what I hear when I go up to the legislature every year. I hear this is the direction they would love to see cities go because it provides a variety of housing and also the flexibility for cities to make their own determination of what it looks like. So that's.
Go ahead.
There you go. I think you called my name. Yeah, so I also support this. I like the idea of it. And then I just was being clarifying in my mind this, when we got down the road, we would certainly on the maps and stuff decide where this could be in play or not. Because I think you still, at the highest level, HOA is not always the answer. There's people that like Morgan because of no HOAs and things, but I think this covers that. I think you can still have your non-HOA developments and your HOA developments. I would assume, when somebody was talking about never the valuation dropping, I think there are instances where HOAs mess up and their own restrictions limit their valuations. I think when they become too restrictive with the age of the 55 plus communities and no rentals allowed and things like that, I think the HOA can affect their own valuation if they're run poorly. And so I think even though we've focused on the good of this, and I support the good of that, I think and I think we can have balance with other non-HOA stuff in the city. But I think that was just a couple thoughts I had there.
I was just thinking on this overlay, would it take in existing neighborhoods that butted up to a new project? Or in the future, you saying, well, it doesn't really seem like they'd come in and, pay the money to tear these down, but we've seen property values go crazy. When they do that overlay, does that extend into existing neighborhoods? So as things change in our city, that's taken into account also. Does that make sense?
Well, it's with how it's set up, it would be just the properties that are part of that application at the time. However, could a adjacent, let's just say we had a 3-acre project come in initially, and then a 2-acre project next door decided to come in later on. I don't see why not. That's atypical. But maybe that could just be written into the ordinance that if an adjoining parcel was combining and it was compatible in terms of streets connecting and sidewalks and was part of the same project.
I'm kind of.
Is that what you're
talking
getting
like,
at? No.
Like an older neighborhood that's butted up next to these projects. And in the future, if the property values are, crazy like they have been now, would the overlay take into consideration that? So as new development or renovations was done there, that it would match up to.
No, not. I don't know if you have an answer for that, Gary. I see where you're going with that question, but where this development has some single family and some attached housing, an existing neighborhood that was probably mostly single family, they would just continue as is. However, I think there should be trail connections and sidewalks, and can they use the open space? Yes, I think there should be a requirement that even though it may be privately owned and maintained, it still is publicly accessible. The neighborhood kids, 1 block away, they can come play on the playground. We don't want to see any of that. You don't pay HOA fees, your kid's got to leave. We don't want that. But there wouldn't be any advantage of a house next to this coming into this zone because it's already built.
There's 2 things. One is the vesting. And your existing subdivisions are all vested in what they've got when they were built. And the second thing is the voluntariness of this. And so if it was an abutting old neighborhood that wanted to raise it all and start again or incorporate itself into something like that, it would have to be a voluntary thing that they would elect to do as property owners.
That's what I was talking.
Okay.
I got a question. So is this managed by a HOA or how are these properties managed? Just
Are you
clarification.
talking about the landscape area?
Yeah, like the landscape area, the park area, some of the, I think we've already covered it, but I just want
Yeah,
a clarification.
HOA is probably the best because of the scale and townhomes. The only way it wouldn't work in an HOA is if the city was willing to take on the park, like the mini park in terms of maintenance. The individual properties could be maintained by the property owners because everything, a townhome could have a little front yard and a backyard, and the houses would have that as well. So I think that's something we'd probably want to just work out with staff and city management and parks as to, is that even an option? I don't want it to become a burden on the city. And I think most cities don't, which is typically why there is an HOA for some of those things. But I do agree with everybody that HOA, I'm on an HOA board and they're meeting right now. So thank you for getting me out of it, by the way. And so I know all about it, HOAs. I've been on the board for 5 years. And I know the issues. And my HOA is simple compared to others. And I'm a believer in simple HOAs.
So Jake, I was gonna ask that question and now you just gave me the lead to my brother-in-law and my sister, they live in an HOA. And when they purchased the home, there was a rule book. And the HOA it's what do you call a third party? Where it's not the residents, where it's actually a company or somebody that manages that HOA that isn't neighbor to neighbor. And they have things like you can't park on the street and you can't have a car in your driveway over 48 hours. But the city doesn't have to enforce it. It's enforced by the HOA on a third party level. And they have an impact fee they pay for that HOA that takes care of sidewalk repairs or street repairs. Theirs is snow plowed, yards taken care of. But they understand the rule book before they move in. And then they enforce that, their own whatever codes, whatever you want to call it, they enforce that within that HOA. And it just seems to be a lot more peaceful because everybody was upfront about it.
Yes. And the thing I would add to that is knowing upfront, which that'll be the responsibility of the HOA, and simplicity of the CC&Rs. If you don't mind, we'll move on to the ADU part and then look forward to seeing what you say, where we go next. Okay. Shifting gears a little bit, but also talking about housing. There's basically kind of 3 types of accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in today's housing world. When you look at actually the names used, one time I had an account, it's almost 40 in terms of names, secondary, Fonzie flat, if you remember Happy Days. And that's actually what they call them in Australia. They're Fonzie flats, granny flat, cottage house, coach house. There's a million names for them. But in terms of kind of land use, internal ADUs, this is now in state code for the first time a few years ago. Attached ADUs, see that on the upper right. Internal means anywhere within the existing building footprint is what it means. And then also detached, which is a separate unit away. And my search of Morgan City Code and talking with everybody, it is not permitted in Morgan City Code. However, state code does allow ADUs. And so the state code trumps the city code. And so by state law, if someone came in with an application for an internal ADU and they met certain requirements, they would have to be permitted. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Here's another diagram. Detached, attached meaning it's been added on to the house, and then also the detached as well. And there's so many ways to do this, and the people do the garages, the basement, upstairs. All types of creativity has come out. And so this is what the state code says on ADUs for internal ADUs. This is what you can do as city. So a municipality, you may prohibit a separate utility, and you really do not want separate utilities. It's too much to manage, and it's very expensive to have a separate gas meter, electric meter, sewer connection, all types of things. It is very expensive. You can require that it does not change the appearance of the primary dwelling, architecture matching. You can require on-site parking. And then also replace any parking spaces if the garage or carport is converted to an ADU. So these are the levers you can pull if you have an ordinance. Prohibit an ADU being within a mobile home. Require the owner of the primary dwelling to obtain a permit for renting it, like a business permit. Because if you're renting it to the public and not to a family, essentially you're a landlord requiring that. And then this next one, I'm gonna skip this because we're not a university city. And so that's where that applies in terms of prohibiting ADUs. And then going on to the, also that prohibit the creation of an ADU if it's served by a filling septic tank, which of course is a great idea. You can prohibit them on lots less than 6,000 square feet, which I don't think that'd be an issue in Morgan City, right? No lots below that. Prohibit renting them for nightly rentals, short-term rentals, which is less than 30 days. Also, you can prohibit them if it's not owner occupied. So the city through an ADU ordinance could require that one of the two units, either the ADU or the main primary dwelling, is occupied by the owner. And the great thing about that type of renting system is for every landlord or for every tenant, you have a landlord. I mean, you'll never see that with an apartment project. And then also you can put a lien against the dwelling if needed. And then the last one is just record a notice that it is a legal ADU. So it could go on the county recorder office as well.
Jake,
So these are what the state allows you to do for internal ADUs. It has nothing to do with attached because those are separate and also detached.
Does it, not this part, but the state code, does it also say owner occupied
Yes. Yep, that's on here,
right there?
right
Sorry, my eyes.
here.
Yep.
That is not occupied as the owner.
Jake?
Yes,
So there's me and my wife. I have a 5-bedroom home. Maybe this question's for Gary as well. Can I rent out just bedrooms?
no. ADUs do need to have own access, kitchen, bathroom, things like that. What you're talking about would be a single room
Yeah, just a bedroom and
occupancy, which is a different type of housing. And renting a room is not the same as an ADU.
Bed and breakfast.
Bed and breakfast is also different. An ADU could be a bed and breakfast, but a bed and breakfast is not an ADU.
you touched on this for so an AUD, AUD,
ADU,
accessory dwelling unit, yeah. So would it require like its own bathroom, its own kitchen, its own?
yes.
to-
Yep, you could do all the health, safety, welfare requirements. There are certain things about, I don't think you can require firewalls. You know that one, Gary?
Yeah, so they changed the code to require only those things that a normal home would require, and took out all the requirements that a 2-family dwelling would be required to have. That is the double firewall, separate air conditioning vents and units, and separation of of utilities, those types of things. So anything that you could do in your home today, in other words, if you go downstairs and build, you got enough room to build a suite, so to speak. You could do with just a general building code or a building permit is what you could do. So there's no special requirements anymore. And interestingly enough, this is not a choice, it's a mandate, and it's mandated on all cities in the state of Utah, but it's also mandated on all HOAs, which is it's the first time I've seen that happen in the state of Utah, but it literally trumps all CCNRs for HOAs. And so you can be in a subdivision that prohibits it, and they can't, they're not allowed to, so. It's the intent of it is to provide the additional space. As you get older, you had kids that lived with you at one time, they filled all the rooms, and now you're older and you got two of you and no kids anymore, hopefully. They're all doing their own thing. And although I found that there's kind of a rebound effect with kids, they do come back. It's kind of like the Trojan horse at the door, you know, it's,
Come back.
hey,
with others.
dad. But the idea is that now you'd be able to fill that house with people who need homes, whether they be a young couple or whether they be a caregiver for you, or whether they be another elderly couple. We've got two across the street from us, one in the basement, one in the, in the upstairs. But that was the intent of the legislature, is to open up a whole new series of housing for individuals who can't afford it right now. So.
Plan and the choices for the city, I would hope this one is, yes, let's put an ordinance for and use the levers that have been given to the city from the state. And then these two are discussion and optional, and could be start with internal ADU and then progress to attached ADU because it's not that much different. And then at some point, if the city does want to consider detached, and one thing about the detached, you could also say what size of lot. Some of the cities that allow detached, it's on larger lots, a half acre, a 1 acre, or something like that, or at least a quarter acre, and certainly not the smaller ones.
Okay, let's do our hard stop.
Okay.
The nice thing about it, this is on the agenda item in the general meeting, so we'll continue the discussion then. And Jake, understand you can join us on your phone and listen to us.
Yes,
I mean, you're driving, so you won't be able to, do too
I've got
much.
Bluetooth.
Okay. So we'll adjourn this meeting and meet in 5 minutes if anybody needs a break. The planning commission's welcome to stay if they'd like. Or you can go. You're not being held hostage.
You're too important. So the answer is yes, we think we should.
Yeah,
And
because we're not even-
All I gotta do, my desk will be there tomorrow. I'll come grab you, we'll take a ride. It goes pretty good.
Then in the nighttime, you need people like, what was it, Christmas Vacation? Cousin Eddie out there pumping all the sewage down into the sewer. I'll tell you when he started says.
Cup was full.
What? Anyway, yeah, neither one of those fit with that category. Interesting, yeah. That was interesting balance. But, some people really wanted it, and other people just came unglued and stuff. So, but for the most part, people are saying, yeah, I have a home that's empty and I want to rent out my basement to a young couple that's looking for a place to live. Let me do it. Why not do it? It's your choice. When I get old enough, I may need somebody living in the house and helping me up and down the stairs. And boy, that's true, Jeff. That's true. That's very true. Yeah. You know,
Afternoon showers, I'm sure is helping the old range ground, huh? Say, keep the lambs fat. He's gonna get out. Well, that really does. Hoping to keep it up all fall. Very seasonal this one. Got a question for you. On your wool, is it hard to
You've been able to.
get marketed nowadays? I swear I've seen some of Pensy sit for the longest time in Saks down there by the access road. Good old starter. You know, get rained on and stuff.
They've got. They didn't like the wool prices. I think they've got 3 years worth of wool sitting in sheds if they kind of. I don't know how long they can sit on them before it's bad.
Yeah, that's what I don't, that's what I don't.
But. Yeah. You know, wool.
We figured just. The cost, was the cost of the shear one? Yeah, these were.
About $4 a head. Get those guys. And. We try to figure. If the wool will pay for the shears. The wool will pay for the trucking to get out there to desert. And home to the desert. And if we can get money to truck them over the this. Wool will cover those expenses. That's good year for us. But you don't get my credit.
Yeah, I wondered, I just seen that sitting down there. I might be gone now, but. See what it is.
And it's.
Maybe there just must not be a market for it. Kind of like the meat prices. I don't think there's still any meat.
No, I don't. Much last year.
I still have my uncle, well, uncle's not really into it much because he's 80 something, but his oldest boy is, I'm not sure how the hell.
elevation for homes, they look like, with the multi-family. Individual, single family homes, they got the elevation. But even then, the council took their time and, sorry, we like this, we don't want that.
Due diligence. Okay.
You know, that's old man syndrome, you gotta use the bathroom.
Well, I just don't pass up an opportunity. I just make sure I don't pass.
Sometimes.
My wife thinks it's a good night if I won't get up once.
Sometimes you don't have to go, but you know you're gonna go somewhere.
Yeah.
So you stand there till you go. You go, wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
Climbing up that ladder.
You'd have.
Remember today when they showed that picture of this.
We good, Denise? Okay, welcome, everybody. Morgan City Council meeting, the general meeting. We welcome all who are here and appreciate your being here. We appreciate Dave being on Zoom.
Thank you, Steve.
We're still hoping and praying for your recovery, buddy.
It's coming along. I appreciate that. The prayers help for sure.
Good deal.
Ready to be done.
And Dave, we welcome you to join us, Ray and Lance. I've asked Ray if he'd give us the pledge, and Eric would lead us in word of prayer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we come before thee at this time. We're thankful for the blessings that we have. We're thankful for this beautiful valley. Father, we pray that tonight as we discuss matters of the city, that we'll be able to have clear and open minds, that we'll be able to make the decisions that will help the city grow and prosper. And we're thankful for those who have gone before us, and pray for thy blessings. And we say, sing in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Thank you. I attended I don't know what you call it, there were senators there and legislators and I noticed the guy that was conducting the meeting, he struggled just about as bad as I do, so I didn't feel too bad. So I believe I need to have a motion to approve the meeting's agenda. So moved.
Second.
Okay, Tony made the motion. Eric,
I second it.
you seconded it. So also, I believe we can put A, B, C isn't there yet, right? Denise? It's not there yet? Okay. So the city council work meeting of August 9th, the city council minutes, truth and taxation of August 9th, and the warrants. Does anybody have a motion to approve them? And before or after, is there any discussion?
Mayor, I've read the minutes and the warrants and would move to approve the city council work meeting minutes of August 9th, city council meeting minutes, truth and taxation of August 9th, and the warrants of August 5th to August 19th.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion by Dave to accept those, the minutes and the warrants, and Jeffrey, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I'd like to welcome David Castro. And we have an opportunity to hear from the public rarely. So this is awesome. I think we all kind of love this. So we'd just, if you'd like to go to the pulpit and state your name and it says 3 minutes, but we're a little bit flexible because we're so unexperienced about having citizens' comments.
Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Mayor and the members of the city council. I was at the planning commission meeting last week and they gave me an opportunity to just say a few things. My wife and I are longtime Morgan residents. As a matter of fact, today is my 29th anniversary to that lovely lady. And with of those 29 years, I've been in Morgan for 28 years. So we built a new home, a 2,600 square foot home on a 0.35 acre lot over here in the Young Estates subdivision, just down the street here, a couple of streets, back in summer of 1994. Together, we raised 7 children, 5 of whom graduated from here at Morgan High. And I'm looking at some of the last names on both the planning city and or planning commission rather, and the city council, and recognizing some last names of maybe some of the kids that played sports with my children at Morgan High, because we had a whole house full of athletes, and at one time actually had 5 teenagers at one time. So it was
Wow.
it was an active home, to say the least. My wife and I retired from some 30 plus years in the medical field, 5 years ago, in March of 2017. We started at entry level EMTs, went on to nursing school, spent several years nursing. I spent several years in emergency room nursing, and then later we went to become physician's assistants. And I retired working in both emergency medicine as a physician assistant, and then 20 years, both of us retired or spent 20 years in pediatrics at the same office, in a pediatric office down at Ogden Regional Hospital. And now that all of our children are raised with families of their own, we find ourselves with an excess space in that 2,600 square foot home of about 1,000 square feet or so. This happens to be the basement at this point. So I started to investigate with Jake, who was very helpful, and Teresa as well, in regards to creating a possible internal accessory dwelling unit, and finding out that there was no particular ordinance here in Morgan for such a thing, and then becoming informed by Jake that the state in I believe it was 2021 with House Bill 82 actually created some specific rules for that for the state, and so I was quite glad to hear that. We have that space in our basement currently that could be easily converted. It's a partially finished basement at this point. It does have a full bathroom and 2 completed bedrooms, but it could be completely converted into a comfortable 2-bedroom, full kitchen, full bath, large living room, and small study type of an internal accessory dwelling unit. It could provide a single person or a couple. I feel like a couple would be ideal. A comfortable living space with a beautiful view, as in the Young Estates, where I happened to purchase the home from the lot, actually from Larry Wiggle, who ran the Spring Chicken Inn for years and years. It was almost a providential purchase of the lot. The wife and I had, she was finishing up a health corps service scholarship payback, and we were living in Lyman, Wyoming at the time. I was working at Bountiful at Lakeview Hospital in the emergency room. We're planning on moving back to a rural area. Both of us had lived in the city previously for a number of years, and we loved being close to a bigger city, but in a more rural area. We looked over in Colville and all around, and I actually initially looked at Colville and Camas, and she was quite wise in her decision to choose Morgan simply because it was so much closer to some bigger cities. It had all the schooling, the grocery store, and all the necessities of living in a small community. And we found it to be beautiful. And it just so happens that the day that Larry's lot became available over there in the Young Estates, it faces south a 40-acre farm owned by Augie, and I can't remember his last name. But is that, you guys know? Anyway, that our lot faces that, and we walked onto it. Was the first place we looked in Morgan, and I told my wife at the time that we looked at it, we need to buy this today. And she was very against it. She wanted to look around. I said, honey, you need to trust me on this one, and we need to buy this. Well, it just so happens that I found out that was the first day that lot had become available. And people had been watching that in the Young Estates to see when it was going to become available. It had become available that very day. We purchased it, and here we are almost 3 decades later and still loving that view. And it's just been a real blessing to our family. So as an internal ADU dwelling for, whatever residents ended up being there, I think it has a lot of potential for just a beautiful residence for someone else to share, and not, having such a view. And the shared yard of a 0.35 acre lot also is not, a cramped space. So that's nice. The other thing that we considered with it, as was mentioned earlier about from Mr. Crane, is it? In regards to, family moving out and people wanting to use their space more efficiently, and obviously would create some additional retirement income for my wife and myself. And so we considered that because the space is, you know, right now she's got 3 areas that she's using for crafts, and we'd like to consolidate that and move it upstairs and make it more efficient for something like another home for someone else. So basically, you know, should the development of city ordinance regarding the internal ADUs be established, obviously our desire would be to comply with whatever the building codes are. You know, that's an obvious thing. I'm not trying to, you know, backdoor any requirements for building. I think Lance has actually been out to my house. He may not remember, a long time ago, and looked around some of the things that we had with trees on the sidewalk and whatnot, and talking about additional building and space and setbacks and all that long time ago. So that's basically it. That's what we're looking at. And we appreciate any consideration by the city council and the planning commission to maybe look forward to developing a city ordinance to allow that to happen. And we'd love to be part of that. And we appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you.
All right.
I've got just a couple of questions, Gary. I can refer to you, I hope. You said something about there had to be a separate entrance. So I'm just going to use my vision of my house. I have an entrance that comes into my garage, and then it goes from the garage to the basement. Is that considered that, where they don't have to come into my house?
Yeah, there really isn't. They don't describe how the separate entrance is accomplished, but that would be a separate entrance. That would be
Okay.
included as a separate entrance.
And David, is your place of,
This so happens I have on the 25-acre lot, the whole cut off of one side and approximately a third of the home is just a wide side of the yard, and there's a front window to the basement in which the place is going to create completely separate concrete entrance into that window. That's actually way on the opposite side of the entrance that we use for our house. Somewhat private and ideal is for an entrance. Basically,
okay, separate way to enter. Okay. So Ty, I'm going to turn to you for help. This wouldn't be a yes, no kind of thing. The planning commission would take care of that and refer it back to us. Is that correct?
Yep, so we're just in public comment, so we just appreciate the input. That is on the agenda as a tasking, as a recommendation, so.
So I'm a little confused on this, the state statute that's in place right now. Talk about how it trumped anything that we did, the city did. How does that work? I mean, if somebody wanted to have an internal accessory dwelling unit right now, you conform to the state and conform to the state statute. I guess what I'm saying is, how could the city deny that?
The city couldn't deny that, yeah. But it would be good if we could put into place an ordinance that actually codified that.
Right. Yeah.
Did you have a comment? I'm sorry, Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, can I?
Hand up, so.
I was just about to say the same thing you were on it though.
Yeah.
But just because, and I appreciate residents that want to do it correctly and then say, you know, what conditions does the city have? So if you look at the parking, all of their orientation, then it just helps us say, yep, this was permitted. It's all approved, and then there's no recourse from even future purchasers or, you know, stuff like that, where if I went through the process. And so it's just nice to have it on the books, say this is our conditions. You know, but just because we don't permit something also doesn't mean it's necessarily illegal in other areas too. Just we don't have a process for that and we haven't permitted it. Same with short-term rentals. It's just not addressed.
So yeah, that's my question with my inexperience is the planning commission would make an ordinance and the city council approve it.
That's
And
correct,
then-
Mayor.
And then it's on the records that way to where we have a little bit of say or no?
It pretty much has been totally preempted. What you got to look at when a state statute, when the state senators and representatives write down everything you're supposed to do, they pretty much have what they call preempted the field. So you put that into your ordinance. Anything addition, for example, if we were to require separate utilities or something like that, that would be contrary to law. And so we couldn't require more than what the state statute does. And so, as Ty indicated, right now, what governs is the state statute. And so he literally could come in. It's kind of like the ADUs. We don't regulate those. Our regulations regarding accessory dwelling units are right now inconsistent with state law. So we'd have to comply with state law because that became effective in May. And so the sooner we can get an ordinance in place, the better off it is. One of the things that we are allowed to ask for, if we desire that, is an additional parking space. Because the biggest problems with these is usually parking. And so we want to make sure that, you know, we put those things into our code to be sure that we require those things.
So you could state that it's not a parking stall on the curb and gutter? It'd have to be inside the curb and gutter?
Yes.
for- Okay,
Yeah, oh yeah.
so that's different.
Not on the curb and gutter, no.
Yeah.
I think I could answer that.
I heard somebody.
So can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, you can. Okay, this is Jake. On the parking, so the state ordinance does allow you to require one additional stall for the ADU. And so if the city's single family ordinance, required 2 stalls for a house, then you could require a 3rd stall for an ADU to do that. And then also there's a few other things that the city can require. The business permit, if you want to regulate it as a business, you can require that they're owner occupied. You can also outlaw them from being used as nightly rentals if you choose. So there is a small list of less than 10 items that the city can regulate to kind of bring in the ADUs. And that's only done through ordinance.
okay, thank you. Dave, did you have a comment?
You know, I just, at the last planning commission meeting, Jake presented the ADU concept, but I think he wanted to get some direction from the council about where we'd go with it. And the commission, Nate in particular, welcomed that coming back to them for consideration. So that might be our approach. Let them go through the details as they've been presented and then bring it to us for approval.
Yeah, I think, so I think if we make a recommendation that this is a positive recommendation back to the planning commission, and
Yeah, I piggyback on what Dave just said. Yes, they did. The planning commission, I think actually, I don't know if look forward is the right word, but I think they wanted to take a look at this and
Yeah, they welcomed it,
he
didn't they?
decided to want to take a look at this. So I'm guessing tonight, Gary, I guess is what we would be doing is just simply saying, we would like to, bounce this back to the planning commission and have them spend some time with it. And eventually they would bring it to the city council in the form of an ordinance. Is that correct? Is that what the protocol?
That works. That is the correct protocol.
so I'm hearing from that, we don't need a motion. We just are given a positive recommendation of the planning commission, okay?
But that is for the, wait,
clarification, that's just for the ADU part.
That's what I was just gonna say. That's.
Let's make sure that's.
Good, yeah, thank you. That's where experience comes in. We aren't opening the can of worms for.
Yeah, let's not open up the whole can. Let's just open up the ADUs.
Okay, so on, do we
Well,
need,
and with that, just the internal, we want them to look at the external as well? Or just right now,
I think
work on the internal
I would say,
or both?
my thought would be the whole thing.
Okay. I would- I
Are
wouldn't
they,
have
are they
heartburn
one
with
and
that.
the same? I mean, I know they're not, but that's.
Well, you got three options.
Ordinance would cover all three types.
Do them all.
Would they, Gary? I mean,
The only thing about an external ADU is you all of a sudden have a question on setbacks and,
yeah,
separation between the units, all those things.
there's, I'm saying that one, I could see potentially being, there's a whole bunch of questions, concerns that would have to be brought up for a detached one or even an attached one. Because if somebody just, well, they could just, I mean, they can't just go on the side of their house and build it right to their property line. There's got to be setbacks, et cetera.
Yeah.
So there'd have to be some kind of stipulation that we'd have to follow.
Well, or on our
That's a
part,
different deal than the internal one, correct?
what if we,
Internal ADU for now.
yeah, suppose, Eric, we said on our part and consider an internal and attached. I mean, we saw that there wasn't too much difference between those two. But for the moment, stay away from the detached ADU. I mean, it wouldn't even be a consideration right now at this point.
The interesting, Mr. Mayor, the interesting thing is that an attached ADU, I know what we don't want. We don't want just somebody building onto the side of their house. But the bottom line is if it fits in the footprint for a home, there are many people who have added to their homes, have added to the footprint of their homes to be able to accommodate an ADU. And I'm sure that's not what Jake referred to when he was talking about attached. It's, you just don't want somebody building a plywood attachment to the house and calling it an ADU. But if it's within the footprint.
I think too, though, that Jake mentioned the requirements can be set for an attached that make it look like it's part of the house. Or maybe the attached is a garage converted to an ADU. I mean, that has the potential of working, or a room above the existing house where it's attached. I think that could have some consideration.
Now, the bottom line is the attached has to be part of just a regular house, as if you were going to build another room, or it has to comply with all the same things that you would have to if you were just going to add to your house.
I mean, we allow additions to homes all the time.
Yeah.
Just in this case, we call it an accessory dwelling unit.
So it was a setbacks.
Yep. And the height requirements and
Mhm.
I feel comfortable at one at a timing these. To recommend that to the planning commission is I think what want to say is we have a positive reference or referral for an internal accessory dwelling unit and also in the near future, work on an accessory dwelling unit
Well, and attached, yeah.
attached.
Well, I think it's good to work on one at a time, but a question for you, Gary. Does the state statute allow a detached accessory dwelling unit to where I don't feel like we want to drag our feet too long on that, because I think that's the one that could probably start having the biggest impact on some of this stuff. That's more noticeable if the state allows some in the backyard that maybe we could rein in a little bit. So I feel like we don't want to drag our feet on that one too long.
yeah, Mr. Mayor, I see a time when the legislature is going to approach external ADUs, but right now they have not done that. So the internal ADUs are mandated. But the external ADUs have not been addressed by the legislature yet. That's still up to the city as to whether or not it wants to allow.
So my question is, if it's an external, it would have to have its own water, sewer, power.
Not necessarily. Yeah,
So how do we hook an external unit to the sewer? I can see the water.
You'd tie on to the existing one.
Oh.
You find out,
You'd tie on to the existing one. You'd tie on to the existing power meter. You could run power out there from your meter and
One water meter?
yeah, one water meter. You could just tap onto
Okay.
your water system in your house, tap onto your sewer coming into your house and away you'd go.
that's what would make it an ADU rather than a separate unit. And sometimes the separate units tend to want to be sold off as separate units. And so by having it as an ADU, in other words, connected through,
Oh, okay, yeah,
I actually have one in my backyard.
okay.
My 89-year-old mother lives in an ADU in the backyard. It's a cottage that we built in around 2000, and all the utilities run through my house. All the electrical and the sewer and the water, everything runs through my house. So
So you can't sell that as a
separate unit.
separate. That's okay, great.
In fact, I have to sell it with my mother in it, which is really,
Maybe that's not too bad, Gary.
He starts smiling when he
Right.
says that.
Yes. City council will say yes to it. You can go ahead and proceed and give Jake direction to start the drafting rather than just kick it back to the planning commission.
Yep. Yep.
The council, you could give Jake direction to start it rather than kicking it back to the planning commission, having the planning commission tell Jake to start it.
You still in hearing distance, Jake?
I'm listening. I hear that, and I can proceed with the ordinance. I would say one thing. I think there's a little bit of gray area between the attached and internal. I mean, if someone comes in and does an add-on following code, but says they're not doing an ADU, but then it's legal to do that. You know, they add on what they call it. Let's just say they add on to the house and they call it an add-on, but later it would meet all the requirements of an internal ADU. Then essentially they have an internal ADU. I do think there is some gray area between those two. I don't know if Gary has any additional comments on that. The detached is clearly a separate. There is a zoning line you can easily draw, but I do see questionable ideas of when an internal and an attached are. But the only difference, I guess, is at the time of the state ordinance, then they build within, they remodel within instead of.
So yeah, I was a little unclear on that too. So help me out here. So I understand the internal, okay? But an attached, does that mean that I could go add on to my home as long as I should meet the setback requirements and convert that into an accessory dwelling unit, right? So it doesn't necessarily,
it then becomes.
then it becomes an internal.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that Jake makes, that the attached becomes internal or can, hence probably a good reason to consider them at the same time.
I mean, I could go out of my house and build a mother-in-law apartment as long as my setbacks and all that were, met code. And that would become internal accessory.
As long as it was hooked onto your.
I was a little
Yeah.
confused on that, but that's cleared it up.
So I think my feeling would be we move forward with the attached and internal, but leave the detached off the table at this point.
In a recommendation, not a motion, correct?
That'd be one recommendation.
Okay. That's the recommendation of the council to take this to the planning commission.
Have Jake start working on the ordinance.
Jake, you start working on it and let me get an attached dwelling unit and a internal.
Yep.
And we'll work later on the detached.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on the mixed residential overlay zone with the council or?
I'd comment on it, Steve. I think that Jake has done a good job in watching out for the city as well as keeping an eye there open at headwinds and what's coming down the road. I like a couple of things about his concept. I think he's been sensitive to the fact that we're small and we don't have a lot of 40-acre parcels to do something. So if we kept the overlay manageable with smaller pieces, it seems to fit what we're doing. But I like the idea of a public input, a public hearing before it's accepted. And secondly, the benefits that need to be there and need to be sold to a community or a neighborhood in exchange for the higher density. And I mean, in my mind, he was able to make that sale or that presentation in about 40 minutes. I think it's something that could happen, community wide. So in that light, I like it. I like what he has done at this point.
So Mayor, may I have a moment? So I had a little conversation with Gary just a minute ago. So one of the questions I had is I said hypothetically, if we put this mixed residential overlay zone in place, okay, and someone wanted to come do this, mixed resident in that area, they'd have to ask for this zoning change. Correct, Gary? Is that correct? My question to Gary was, so prior to actually making that zoning change, I said, could you actually require a very detailed plan or rendering of what that's going to look like? Not some carte blanche thing, but would it be within the planning commission's right, the city's right to ask of that developer, okay, we want a very detailed rendering of what this would look like? Is that, and you indicated that would be okay, correct?
Yes, and that was a good question. And that is the advantage of this type of development. And that is that the city can ask for all of those details. We have one currently going on in Layton called the Trails. I can't remember how many acres it is, but it's a substantial number of acres. And they have the details all the way down to the landscape plan, the trails plan, the location of units, the elevations of those units. They're all, before they actually get that overlay actually attaches as a zone, we have all of that information. They're working on all of that information with the city. That's the advantage of that plan, rather than just saying, this is general plan for R110 or R120, whatever, which, you just look at the basic fundamental zoning questions of, do you have access? Is this the right place for it? Are the surrounding uses compatible, that type of thing. But with that, you pull down a lot of detail and you can request a lot more detail from the developer.
Gary, couldn't that be required at the public hearing at that point in the process?
Yes.
Yeah, again, I think you need that to promote the concept.
Yep.
The higher density concept.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's what is very helpful in doing, is showing the public what presented there.
Well, I'm excited about it because my whole feeling is times are changing. Half-acre lots are not gonna probably be the big push. And so I took the I don't know what you call it. Pretty sure it wasn't illegal, but I took some developers on a ride and we went through some of these subdivisions and every one of them was hyped about the opportunity to sit down with the city and plan this together instead of going back to engineering and things 3 or 4 times. And every one of them were just thrilled that the city would actually work a detailed, what the city wants and how it would benefit the city and them. So I'm just thrilled about it. It's kind of a great footprint, I think, for the future of our city.
You know, Steve, too, I like the overlay concept. It's a tool that we can keep in our back pocket. I have vacant land behind in my backyard. I'm not sure what it is, maybe 30 acres. And to say, here's just a zone of 15, units per acre, just a pure zoning designation, I'd have a hard time with that. But to say, here's an overlay of the residential aesthetics and the looks and the feel and a community, if you will, I could picture that a community to itself. It would make sense, and yet we're still getting the increased density that is probably going to be required.
Yeah, I'll just go one more comment. Eric, go ahead. No, you're good.
Sorry about that, Mayor. I think this is a decision that we probably got to think about for a while before we go making this decision, because like I said previous, we've all moved here to Morgan and we love the rural atmosphere and we love Dave said it, the 40 acres behind him. We love that open feel and that open concept. When we go, once we go down this road, I've never seen houses taken back out, moved back to farm ground or pasture or whatever it is, I mean, this has got to be something we really got to think about before we go opening this up. Because I'm sitting here just thinking, I'm sitting here thinking about all the open places we still got in Morgan, those open concepts, that open space that we all love and appreciate. The one right there behind Dave's houses. I love that open space, but we go opening up this. We could really change face of Morgan with this one is all I'm saying. We got to put some thought into this.
Do you think, Eric, that
I got some concerns. That's all I'm saying.
do you think that that this would inhibit what a property owner would want to do with his property, or do you think you're feeling like it might motivate him to do something?
Exactly.
Okay. I talked with Ty when I first became mayor, and he gave me some great insight. With the comments when I was running for mayor was, we got to put a gate up.
Well, we said that for 30 years.
But what he said is stuck with me. And probably I live on the north side, and it's probably the biggest explosions on that side right now. And he said, haven't you met good people though? And I went, you know what? I have. What I'm saying is I'm not saying let's jump into this and turn this into but I think what I'm saying is that if I was a property owner and wanted to exercise my right and take this piece of property and turn it into a development, I think this just gives that property owner more
bang for his buck.
Yeah, and it gives him more options though. Whatever that property owner, there's several areas that he could focus in. Do I want a half acre? Do I want this or that? But so I'm with you, Eric. I feel the same way as you do. And I wouldn't want to say that I don't know what the word is, but way forward in crowding our city. Actually, what I'd like to do or have see happen is that we have our infrastructure, our traffic control, hot spots and other things like that actually maybe move ahead of this stuff so that we aren't on our heels. And so I'm sorry if I put like it's my attitude that let's get this place going, let's get this going. But I think in the future, it's something that could be more inviting.
So, Mayor, let's make sure we understand though that the difference between a zone change and this overlay. because I think that's critical. We have the overlay. It's a tool we have in our pocket. That doesn't mean to say that a piece of property is approved for a higher density development. The beauty of it is, in my mind, is we have the public input before anything's done. If a developer said, here's a residential looking arrangement, as we've just heard about, we say to the public, okay, here's all the benefits from that. Here's the higher density. Do these benefits outweigh the higher density? And if you hear a resounding no, okay, we'll put it back in our pocket. We don't have to accept it. I mean, if the neighborhood says, yeah, that's great. My daughter needs a place to live. I'd like to see that right there. And here's these benefits outweigh the higher density. Then we've got a green light to go ahead. So my point is, we're not opening up a zone that says at this point, like, again, general plan's a different discussion, but we're not tonight considering a zone that would say high density. Again, an overlay is different than a zone.
Agreed. Is there any more
Yeah,
comments?
I just view it as an additional option for the city. You've got 12 acres of ground, they're gonna come in and R110, R120, whatever it's zoned for. And if we, and as a community, as citizens come in and say, well, we'd like a different feel, we can. If we want square quarter acre lots, that's our only option right now. To say yes to that or no to that. It gives us options, and I'll always be in favor of more options. We can say no to any of the options, but to have an option is better than to be painted into a corner. So that's my view.
Well, and Jeff, look at the we have approved higher density regularly. This council right here has, and what do we end up with? 4 units in a row that all look the same. They're not offset, they're not looking residential, they're just looking like 4 plain units. And we're doing that over and over again. Here's an option to say, okay, here's your 4 units, but you might have a single family home next to it. And you may have, we saw the picture, you may have a 4-unit building that looks like a single family home. This is an option to change that up in my mind.
Mayor. So some good points have been made. As I'm sitting here thinking this through, I'm thinking, the mayor talks about property owners, and I'm thinking a lot of times the property owner, the farmer Brown, is going to sell it to a developer. And if that piece of ground is in an overlay, is part of that mixed residential overlay, maybe I'm a little bit jaded here, but that developer is going to want to build what? He's going to want to build what's selling at the time, I mean, and we've seen that here lately, because most of the things we've dealt with in the last little while have been, medium density residential, to Dave's point. I'm okay with that as long as we can see what the end product is going to be. And I'm also okay with that. And again, to Dave's point, if the neighbors surrounding that proposed mixed residential are not in favor of it, and very much opposed to it, to Dave's point, I'm okay with it too, if we're able to say, no, we don't like that. But I mean, that, to me, that's the criteria that we have to take into place. And also, I think, Dave, you make another good point. Yeah, it will allow us, if we go ahead with it, it doesn't have to look cookie cutter. We can make a determination on how we want that to look. But yeah. But I guess my point is if it's in the overlay, I mean, right now developers want to build. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it looks to me like they want to build something medium density because it's what's hot right now. So
You have to pay attention to the market, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think it gives us the, just like you say there, Tony, gives us the control.
Yeah.
The fact that it's an overlay versus a zone change.
Jeff, do you have a comment?
Well, see how it all plays out, I guess.
Uh,
Go ahead. I don't know. Don't add to it.
Okay. I'd like to move on to item or number 6, the city reports and business. Is there any more discussion on this matter or? we don't
You know,
might
Steve,
need a motion or?
it says discussion / action. What action was, is being requested? Do you know what that is?
Just clarification, if you're tasking Jake on both.
Well, I was asking either you, Ty, or Steve. I
It's not a
guess.
decision point. It's just, talk about it and see if you want to give direction, on moving forward with.
So we recommended Jake to kind of plan or?
Well, you did on accessory dwelling unit.
We already did on that.
Yeah, this would be the overlay zone.
Yes.
Uh,
Jake,
I'm here.
did you like the work we're giving you?
You're piling it on. Yeah, so happy to do it if you make that recommendation. And of course, it would go through a process. It would probably be a little bit more process than an accessory dwelling unit in terms of creating an ordinance, but it would follow that public process of creating a draft ordinance, working through with the planning commission till we get their recommendation, they like it, then they would recommend it, and then when it would come to you, and there would be a public hearing on the ordinance, and then also the ordinance would come to the council for review and adoption. So you would see it in writing as well, an actual ordinance.
Perhaps, Steve, just a comment from each council member on their preference to move forward or not.
That sounds good. Eric?
I think we need to just task Jake with what we already did and skip this for now. And think about it and come back to it. That's my preference.
Okay. Tony?
I think I'd like to ask the planning commission if they'd like to tackle them both at once or work on them separately. Take some time on each one of them.
Lance can speak for the whole camp.
If you're asking my opinion,
Processes.
if you're asking.
Just to
my
clarify
opinion,
I mean, there's a lot there, and I don't want you to feel like we're piling on you right now with, they're both fairly important issues, so.
This overlay zone is gonna be a fairly long process to get worked through city staff and planning commission. It'd probably be, I would hate to see a good opportunity get away from us because we didn't move for a year. I mean, it's a lot to take on with the general plan, but it's gonna be a long process, whether we start now or whether we start in a year or 5 years, it's gonna be a long process.
It'd be okay if we ask you to start on it now?
You just start biting away at it, I guess. They're little.
Yeah, I agree with what Lance says. It's gonna be a long process to get this one done. It's quite a shock. And I think that's what they're excited. It's a shock to what we've had, shock what we've seen. It's different from what normal is for us. And so the process is gonna take some time. What I like about it is if we eventually do put in place, it's just an option for a developer to say, I'd like to do this. If you make it too hard for him, he's just gonna put the cookie cutter like we've already got. The 20 acres down the road. If he comes in, developer comes in and looks at the overlay zone and it's too difficult for him, we make it tough for him, he's just gonna put in the 35 half-acre homes and go with and be done. So I'm not sure it's gonna fly with most people. Most developers are not gonna jump on and do it. It's gonna be more, even though they get more, my interpretation, even though they get more homes per acre possibly, it's gonna cost them more to build them. If you have to make everyone look different, it's gonna cost them more to build those, particularly if you have single family and multifamily together, it's gonna cost more to build. So the current developers of today, they're gonna come in and look at that and say, okay, that's fine. I'm just gonna still put my, quarter acre lots in and be done. I think. The big developments you guys have already looked at, and I don't think you looked at any small one or not. And I haven't been to look with you. The ones you looked at, have you looked at any 3-acre parcels, or they all been 40, 50, 60, 100 acre parcels? If I'm a developer and I'm gonna come and be able to do 50 acres of certain style, that's one thing. If I've got to just take 3 acres and put in trails, and parks and ponds and roads and all the criteria to it, I'm not sure I would do it for 3 acres. Anyway, that's just my thought, off the top of my head, my thoughts on it. Should we look at, I'm not opposed to looking at it. It'll take some time to get it done though. I'm not opposed to having Jake start on it. With the general plan, ADU, I think there's other things in my mind are more important to take precedence. I'm not in favor of starting the process. I'm not opposed to starting the process. Anyway, that's what I should have said probably.
So I guess in answer to your question, I would probably recommend that we have the planning commission start taking a look at both of them. Because I think it's something that probably we're going to be looking at more and more down the road.
Jeffrey? Agree. Jeff, you agree? So start looking.
I'm okay to have them start looking, but I think with the priority being right now on the accessory dwelling units. I don't want,
Yeah.
Master plan, we need to finish up the master plan. We've got plenty irons in the fire right now. Let's make sure we keep them prioritized in the correct order for the city.
Dave's got to go.
I think, I thought you were all saying I've already gone. Went. Ray, you make a good point there, and that may well be. And I think a lot of how that pans out is dictated by economics, and it may be that smaller parcels just don't work. But nonetheless, the economics are going to drive that, and it does happen down below. We've seen that the mayor's taken people on tours that show it. So economics are saying that, yeah, it can happen, but time will tell whether it does here. I'd be in favor of moving forward while we have Jake and his abilities to work on both of these. He has some expertise that we may not come across again. So I picture it as an opportunity. But I'd like to move forward.
Okay, so this is going to Jake. Ray, okay.
If there's an area where the council feels it would fit and would work well, then if it's in your tool belt, then you can apply it. If it's not, you can't.
Yep.
Okay, so advice, this is just a recommendation to the planning commission, Jake, to start working on this mixed residential overlay zone and accessory dwelling units, internal and what was the other one? Addition?
Attached.
Attached. Are you still with us, Jake?
I'm here. Yeah,
And does that sound fun?
that does sound fun. I actually like that kind of work. And I will prioritize the ADU ordinance. We'll get that in the pipeline first, and then the other one to follow.
Perfect. Now, help me on the general plan. if we get working on the general plan, this doesn't get in there, it doesn't mean it's against the law, right, Gary? If we approve a general plan and this isn't in there, it doesn't mean you can't,
You can always add it.
you can add it.
You bet.
Okay,
Work in progress.
okay. Any more discussion? Yeah, let's move on to item 6. Ty, you have a lot of projects to teach us about.
Broken record at this point. But I have some other updates before I get to the projects. There's a couple things to make the council aware of. The TARP program, the team.
Ty, is your mic on?
No, it was on the whole time till now. Thanks, Dave.
Hey, good work. You do have a voice.
And that concludes my.
You're a riot.
Oh, no, we're just getting warmed up. We got hours still. I'm just kidding. But
I should've left an hour ago.
so- Hey, till mayor shuts me down, I'll just be talking over here. So anyway, the Utah Local Governments Trust sent us our rebate is what I call it, but it's the Team Appreciation Recognition Program. So I just making the council aware of that. We got a check for $1,253. Just part of that recognition program that you're aware of and that we support each year. So that's good that we got that. From the last meeting, just a follow-up item, Gary did help us draft and the mayor did sign the letter to Como Springs. Or not to Como Springs, to the County Planning Commission with our concerns that we had talked about last time. You may have all seen that.
Good work. Thank you.
You all saw that letter, yeah? Okay, well, okay, well, anyway, that happened. I was just letting you know that
Yeah.
that happened and Denise just said she'd send a copy of that sign letter just so you can see what is what we formally did there.
Great. Thank you.
Just a little update. Rocky Mountain Power has agreed to pipe the ditch out in front of their substation. Kind of the outcome of couple years discussion on the how they tried to charge us for our substation, and part of that is the outcome of that is I'm just saying, you're not working with us. We asked you to join us and pipe that ditch all at the same time, and now they're coming back and doing theirs.
That's the one on the Island Road.
Yep. Yeah. So our substation that we piped the ditch when we built the new substation, and then theirs is just left in weeds. And they're coming back to pipe that. So that'll just improve that, weed patch on that section of the road anyway. So, then Young Street Bridge project still moving along. They just finished the offer or the right of way needed from Sue Ann Jenkins for a sliver of property that was needed outside of the fence. And so they finished the appraisal. They got the appraised value, and they're just going through that process to offer to purchase that land from her that's needed for the construction. I don't anticipate it'll be a problem. It's just been a long process. We did hear back from the North Morgan Water Users Association that they're getting their appraisal, not just going with the appraisal that we got and forwarded to them. So we're still in that process, but we're in that stage of the agreement where we both get appraisals and then we compare the two if they're within 10%, or $20,000 or 10%, whichever is greater. Then we can either average those or have future discussions. But there's probably more discussion coming on that, just to let everybody know where we're at. Then the rest of them are on the agenda. was looking for the rest of my notes. I was like, I have more, I promise. I only wrote down the notes that weren't on the agenda, so I'm sorry. I'll just read the agenda now. So also just to make the council aware, I signed up the city to be part of a geothermal study project with UAMPS. It's not a project that's in the works, but they put a study group together to study the technology. So we're still looking for all kinds of different ways to generate power. The project committee, we just passed a $80,000 project, and we're only 0.13% of that project, so we're in for 100 kilowatts. So basically, they study it. If a project comes to fruition, then we get 100 kilowatts out of it, and we'll do more agreements at that point. But so it's a commitment of $1,040 to be part of that study.
Hi, what was your reasoning in, I mean, that seemed like a less than 1%, a pretty small commitment. Should we have done more? What was your reasoning in the 100 kilowatts?
Because we're committed in other projects that may or may not come to fruition. So if they put a project together, they'll put out a solicitation depending on the size of the project, then we'll reassess how much we're in for. But it's basically just to get our name on the list and be included at this point. But
okay,
it depends on, we have some in solar, that's project still coming.
right.
We have the carbon-free power project. We're working through that every day. There's always pluses and minuses with that one. I just attended a conference last week, but we have resources tied up in that one. And then we are looking at, just also to make the council where we're looking at an internal generation of a natural gas generator right now, project. And I think there might be a grant opportunity as a backup power source for the city utilities. So basically the concept there is instead of getting a grant to do backup generation at the sewer, backup generation for the water, backup generation for each facility, I'm saying it's a centralized backup, because if we lose transmission, we'll be able to internally generate maybe enough power to run most of the city and back up our utilities. And I'm just calling it like a central backup generator. And then of course it would be on a percentage. You can't just say, hey, now it's backup. But anyway, just looking at all kinds of alternatives. It's getting more complicated all the time, and being able to rely on transmission is getting more difficult too. So anyway, that's more than I was.
This keeps our foot in the door then. That's a good note, I think.
Yep. Let's see, the train depot project still moving along. We're down to pretty much working on handrails. The floor has been refinished. It all got patched. Oh yeah, and the bathrooms are still being tiled and redone. The handrails, because we removed them, needed to be brought up to current code. And so we had to get a new design for that. And this whole design build process has been pretty interesting, but trying to make it look right without spending too much money on just handrails.
It's only externally done.
I think so. Yeah. Yep. I am putting together another grant for that building to finish it out, but to make it a visitor center. If we have some agreements there, so basically take it from the restoration part to a functional space with all the fittings and furnishings and all the stuff on the inside to make it a functional building. But that's not until, the application is not until October. The sidewalk project, maybe I'll let Lance talk about this one, but we're pretty much done. Right?
Yeah, I never got back down by it this afternoon, but I think they finished placing all the rock. I believe all the sod and landscaping is done. They're gonna be working on doing the new collars around manholes and water valves starting tomorrow.
Yes, it's nice to have a couple of projects finally wrap up. The emergency repair of the sewer line that's on there is related to the road project. So one of the residents, their lateral got crushed when we installed one of the sumps. And didn't recognize it till after the road had been paved, but the sewer line was actually through a neighbor's backyard. And Lance was able to assess that situation and made a proposal that we just bring it out front to a different street. It's one house off of a corner lot. And so we went ahead and made that not only fixed, but improvement. So it took one neighbor's lateral out of another neighbor's backyard, separated the two. So that was good
On the
move.
end of Commercial Street? Is it-
No, this was, it's 81 north, 200 west.
Yeah, so it's on our road, on our sidewalk project.
Oh, on
It's on 100 north.
okay.
Yeah, a home sewer lateral went out the back through the neighbor's yard. We didn't know it was there. It went right into a sump. And I think with the depth of the sewer line, the sump, I think they wouldn't even know it was there. I think they'd have been right on top of it, just barely. And in the process of digging would have crushed it. The sewer didn't actually start backing up till Saturday, the 13th was when they first had a problem.
What was leaking on Commercial Street right there?
A water leak,
Was that a water leak you had there?
another, yeah. It got repaired.
No, we can only have one water leak tomorrow, not two.
That was
That was the other one.
That was the other
gone.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And anyways, real quick on a side note to do with that sewer lateral being crushed. I've talked with Kale, who's with the sewer, and I've talked with Matt with Jones and Associates and Kyler with Jones and Associates. And apparently, the homeowner, the sewer lateral is your responsibility from the main to your home. But there's been some passed recently that we are supposed to know where they are. So going forward with our GIS system, Kale's going to have Twin D when we do camera work and inspections, make note of all the sewer laterals and their locations. And Kyler with Jones will be able to attach that file to our GIS system to where in the future for our design of our own projects or just to have that information, we'll be able to go into our GIS system, click on that and have measurements of where every sewer lateral is. So we can locate that. So we avoid this going forward in the future. So hopefully as time goes on, we'll be several years probably doing inspections throughout the whole city, but we'll get that to where we have record of it and know where these things are.
That's awesome.
Yep, thanks, Lance. And so last one, sewer lagoons back online. So last week, there's 2 air pumps. They got one online last week and today they got they were supposed to get the other one fixed online. So all the diffuser system, the only thing that's missing now is the building that goes over the the blower motors. Yeah. So pretty excited. Kel said the smell went away almost immediately since we, started to add oxygen back in. Then we also purchased I don't know what you even call it, but it's a machine that helps take off the duckweed off the top. It's a little conveyor system that just takes it, puts it right on the bank. Has kind of like boom, I would call it, like on an oil spill. It has like a boom with skirting on it. You just put out, it brings it in to a low gathering point where the little conveyor thing. Takes it off. He started in pond 4, but it was so heavy and bogged down the machine. He went to a different lagoon but in the future, when we stay on that, that'll also help in a big way. It's just you have a market for the duckweed? Oh, do we have a market for the duckweed? Yeah, we're gonna put it in pill form and call some health miracle and sell it right back to you.
What I'm thinking, yeah.
So if I come back in a couple months with hair, you'll know.
Yeah.
That we're onto something.
So basically, we haven't run the sewer ponds long enough to know the new numbers.
Oh, so
with the
the-
blowers on it. Is
yeah.
the numbers going down?
Well, so we're not
don't
gonna,
know yet.
yeah, at the end of August is
When he takes the samples.
yeah, so the next ones, and then we'll start we might not have, I don't know, we'll see, but we'll be able to then track if we're making progress on it or not. And like, every time one number goes up, another one goes down. It's a constant. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it
there's,
does. But
there's,
it'll be interesting to see where those numbers are at.
Yeah.
As we get this done,
Yep.
And then we may not know until next summer when we get
comparables and,
comparables, when
Yeah.
it gets hot again.
yep. But at least that's one more, one more thing within our control that we can, feed oxygen now, and
Yeah, that's a good thing.
we're pretty excited about that. So I think that's all my updates, unless the mayor or council have anything else from staff. Oh, and today we had Denise brought us a motivational speaker, and we had a whole, of course, saw the invite, but just want to thank her for that. It was a huge value. Normally the speakers, cost more than 10 grand at a conference, and we had 2 of them for, the 30 something people that were here, and a very nice lunch, and just loved every minute of it. Just thought, man, what a good move, and appreciate that, Denise. I think it was well received. Afterwards, the speakers asked me, how do you think it went for the whole team and all of our employees and stuff? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I didn't even think about all this stuff, because I was personally thinking about all my next steps, and it's just good to fine tune our mental state, and it was good.
Hey, good work, Denise.
I guess one other question, Ty, that we may be hearing starting tomorrow. How are we with traffic and crossing guards and everything else from the city's perspective with school starting tomorrow?
Yeah, so we have all of our crossing guards returning. So that part is awesome. Lance has done a great job on getting the striping done, and I didn't even know that. The other day, I was like, well, UDOT came and already painted, and he's like, no, they didn't. That was us. So go ahead, Lance. And
Yeah, with moving that new sidewalk, like anything with the state or UDOT, they still haven't got the signage done. I'm trying to work with the lady to find out what exactly we can do. I mean, they're gonna go and put the bare minimum sign in, but at that 100 North intersection, I'm sure most everyone has sat here and watched some kid for 5 minutes try to cross that street. I'm wondering if they'll allow us to put in lights like we did across from the middle school. At that intersection, a push button light that comes on, lights up. I mean, it's not a big deal for them, but that is a big deal for us. So I think it'd be worth our expense to do that if they'll allow that at that intersection, and try and make it a little better for the people that are using it. Crossing guards, we've got a good group of them. All of them came back, and seems like we're getting some good support from the resource officer. He actually reached out to me today. They said they're provided some extra hours for deputies to help patrol crosswalks and the school zones, and they were had deputies signing up for some overtime for that. So hopefully we can get some presence out there, and I think that'll help fix a lot of the problems. You just get a few days of people getting pulled over and getting some tickets. I think it'll start fixing itself.
but it's kind of odd, but we're staffed in that area, so. I mean,
Nobody else is staff.
I mean, if you think about all the bus drivers and everything else, exactly, substitute teachers and all that, it's a. Yep, so we're glad. And we also have a couple of employees that are Lance is gonna train, so we have a little depth in our bench there too to just sub for them when they're not available, so. So, yeah.
Lance, you made me think of something. So years ago, we decided that we would go ahead and we would fund one police officer, one deputy to work more, to concentrate on Morgan City and spend most of their time in Morgan City. And we're still doing that, as I recall, right? We're funding one deputy.
Yep.
Do we get any feedback as to, do we have any report from who that deputy is and maybe what they're doing in the city, or is it, I just got thinking about that when you said we had some help from the deputies, and I was just wondering how that was working and if we were getting any sort of feedback on how much time they were spending in the city. And I guess what I'm saying is, are we getting our bang for our buck on that?
I can answer a little bit. I've talked to the sheriff's department about it, and they promise us or explain to me that we're getting the bang for our buck, but the explanation wasn't that stimulating. So I feel like I still need to have a conversation with them.
I guess to my point, if you had a complaint, Mayor, about something that was going on as far as law enforcement in the city, I'll put you on the spot. Would you know exactly which deputy it is that's assigned to Morgan City?
I think it's a roving. I think it's.
They always have a city car, and I'm confident that we always have one officer on shift. But I don't usually call individual officers. Like, we normally don't do that. Usually call
We did
the
have a
main
complaint.
dispatch.
I just was wondering if it was working.
That part's working, but as far as like reports on like how many citations and all that, I haven't been getting that or tracking it. And then I also look at, the 132,000 that we pay per year and what the options are, but that's in line with one officer and as far
Yeah,
as
the
like one
county-
officer and benefits and.
County sets that fee, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so, which one and all that, but, not, I guess, alternatively, like having our own. It's a lot better than having our own department.
For sure. Yeah.
But we could probably get more reports, but we don't get those because we also we don't operate the justice court, right?
Right.
So most of the numbers and stuff would come through that system if it was all in-house.
Well, I guess my question is so when we, I was down, Ray was there as well when we started down this path, and I guess my question is, the whole premise is we contract for one officer who we hope dedicates most of his time in Morgan City. Is that happening? Is that time being spent in Morgan City? So
I think that's happening.
And so,
For sure, yeah, and I'll ask them, like in the parking lot, and they'll know exactly who the city car is.
okay,
You know what I mean? And they call it that too. It's like, which one's a city car? And that's also in addition to the resource officer. It's not the same. Lance was talking about the resource officer that helps at the school. So we always have one pretty much at the school and then always a city car. So it's, I feel like we've had good response when we say, hey, we have this problem on this street, or people are parking on this street, or can you help with this and that and the other. But we typically don't get feedback on, hey, this just happened. This is how many, or, what we did about the situation.
I'm not asking them for a big paper exercise. I was just wondering if you felt we were getting It was working. So
Oh, yeah. No, I,
We had a resident complain about some shooting going on within the city.
was it me?
Well, this was pretty big shooting, AR, several shots and other things, but they did respond to that. And it was funny, the day that they responded, the kid shot his thumb off. So it was, so they are listening. I feel like they're covering pretty good. Is there any more comments?
Yes.
Ty, details on the officers, can't you get that on Morgan Moms?
I do have, I do have one more report.
Okay,
One
okay.
quick report.
I don't think that's in my job description, if you want to go down that road.
And I'll ask for your and Jeff's help on this COG meeting the other night. Just a quick report on COG meeting. Have we got all the RDAs? Is the county and the schools both signed off on the new RDA agreement?
Nope, we just sent it to them, but we haven't heard anything back yet.
And then the other thing that was brought up is the county is very aware of our concerns with 100 South. That came up in the COG meeting as well. So as far as the traffic on 100 South and the Como.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so we had a little discussion on that as well. So I think that was the two main items, was the RDA and then the discussion on 100. So is there anything else, Jeffrey? You can. I think that was it. That's all I got.
Adjourn.